finding concrete solutions to a continent-wide problem. Ministers from all EU states are working on how to deal with tens of thousands of people seeking a better life in the bloc. But finding a consensus among all 27 members won't be easy. So what are the challenges, and can they reach a balance that benefits those making the often hazardous journey to Europe? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Imran Khan. Ministers from all 27 members of the EU have come together to try and agree on the best strategy to deal with rising migration. Back in 2015, Europe attempted to find a lasting solution to the millions of people crowding at its borders because of the civil war in Syria. A problem left unresolved led to Turkey to relax its borders, opening the gates onto Europe's doorstep. Fast forward 8 years and the number of refugees and migrants heading to Europe is rising rapidly. The International Organization for Migration says so far this year nearly 55,000 migrants have made their way to the continent. Nearly 90% came by sea. More than 1,200 people died on the journey or went missing. The top 5 countries they are coming from are the Ivory Coast, Guinea, Pakistan, Syria and Egypt. While France is trying to reduce migration numbers, Germany is welcoming migrants, 1.3 million of them last year alone. Most were asylum seekers. Now, Germany wants to attract 400,000 skilled workers this year. One important reason, the German Institute for Economic Research says immigration to the EU has increased its GDP by more than 1% every year. Now, just a clarification before we move forward, I want to remind our viewers and our panel the distinct differences in terminology here. When we refer to refugees, we're talking about someone who's been forced to flee their country due to persecution, war, violence and even natural disaster. An asylum seeker is a person who doesn't quite fit the strict criteria outlined by the United Nations, but has applied for protection as a refugee and is awaiting an outcome from immigration officials. And finally, the term migrant fits anybody who's simply choosing to leave their country in search of a better job and a better life. For more on this, I'm joined by our guests in Sarajevo, Ugochi Daniels, Deputy Director General for Operations at the International Organization for Migration. In Rome, Ferdinando Nelli Ferrucci, President of the International Affairs Institute, a non-profit think tank based in Italy. And also in Brussels, Leila Boudou, Senior Policy and Advocacy Officer for Caritas Europa, a confederation of 49 Catholic relief organisations operating across Europe. A warm welcome to you all. I'd like to begin in Sarajevo with Ugochi Daniels. In many ways, in fact, probably all the ways, the IOM is the frontline agency when it comes to migration globally. Now, the 27 member states are trying to come up with a strategy, but that's going to be incredibly difficult to make everybody happy. Are you of the opinion that an agreement can be reached?
Well, we're hopeful. We certainly welcome the progress and the commitment to regional cooperation and responsibility sharing. And we know that the only way that countries are going to derive the benefits of migration and mitigate the risks of irregular migration is with a regional pact for cooperation. So we remain hopeful.
Ferdinando, in Rome, do you remain hopeful that we can get to an agreement?
Well, I would like to be optimistic. I still have to be prudent. The problem of migration is very controversial and very politically sensitive in most, if not all, European countries. So to find a right balance between solidarity and responsibility so far has proven rather difficult. Today, there is a decision to be taken in the Council of Ministers of Interior in Luxembourg on a package of measures that are meant to revise a regulation which has been at the very basis of how to deal with asylum seekers in Europe. So far, it has been very difficult to find an agreement. I hope that today there is a compromise and that an agreement will be found based on the idea of more solidarity among member states in the distribution, at least of asylum seekers.
Leila Badeau, you're, again, a frontline agency. You're dealing at the sharp end of many people coming into Europe. What would you like to see? What would you like the agreement to be?
Well, I mean, we don't want to have an agreement at all costs, and certainly not at the cost of the rights of migrants and refugees. So for us, we need to have more solidarity among the member states, but we also need to have better conditions to welcome a refugee with dignity. We fear that the agreement that might come out tonight will increase border procedures in substandard conditions, and will also increase detention of people, including children, at the border. So for us, this is a very worrying development.
Ogochi Daniels, this could well be an agreement at all costs, and that's something that Leila Badeau says she wants to avoid. But if there is going to be agreement, it's going to be something that isn't going to make every country happy. Germany, for example, is looking to increase migration. Italy, on the other hand, France are looking to try and reduce it. What does it look like? What does an agreement look like that, for you, that actually allows you to be able to do your work, your job?
So, what Leila said is critically important. Upholding, protecting, and fulfilling the human rights of migrants, refugees, asylum seekers is critically important. So it is therefore necessary that the agreement protects this in the way it handles irregular migration. But let's also keep in mind that human civilization has been shaped by migration. Migration is the solution for continued development in the region to address critical labor shortages that countries have, and that even with compromises, this can only be successfully achieved and solutions derived through regional cooperation, through solidarity. And so we hope, certainly as the UN Migration Agency, and with reference to the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, that these, not just the values and the principles, but that all components of a comprehensive approach to migration make it into the agreement.
In Rome, Ferdinando, what Ogochi Daniels has just shown us and told us is the more sensible approach. But when it comes to immigration, particularly when it comes to domestic politics, the conversation is very rarely sensible. It's around race. It's around xenophobia. Emotions run high. Right-wing politicians use it as a tool to gain popularity. Is there a sensible conversation to be had in places like Rome, in the UK, in France, in Germany, about migration, or does it always have to be this very emotive conversation?
So far, unfortunately, emotions have prevailed, and in many occasions, not only in Italy, but in many European countries, migration have been decisive and in determining electoral results. This is something on which I think we have to be aware. The paradox is the following, is that we need migrants. We need, particularly in countries of European countries like Italy, we desperately need migrant workers because this is some of the requirements of our labor market. But at the same time, we have to organize migration in an orderly and manageable manner so that we don't have to face irregular migrants coming all together along our coasts. The ideal solution would be a sort of planning of migratory flows in a cooperative fashion between countries of origin and countries of destination, so as to be able to fulfill the requirements of our labor markets, but in an orderly manner. This so far has not proven possible, unfortunately, but I think and I hope that at some stage we will reach that stage, because we need migration, there is no doubt, but we need regular migration, migrations that are managed in a cooperative manner.
Leila Boudou, does that kind of language scare you? We need migration in an orderly manner. We need it in a regular manner. Does that make you think of offshore processing centres, like things like the UK government, for example, floating Rwanda as a possible destination? Does that make you worried?
I mean, yes, we are worried that there is a lot of focus on return and on preventing people from arriving to EU territory. So for us, we want to preserve access to asylum. We want to make sure people can lodge an asylum application, can have a fair process to identify their protection needs. And above all, we also want to have safe and regular pathway for people in need of protection and also for other types of migration, including labor migration and family reunification. Because the problem we have today is that many people are forced to take on dangerous journey through the sea, for instance, and are dying at sea every year. Only in 2023, more than 1,000 people die in the Mediterranean Sea because of the lack of safe access to Europe. So this is a big concern, of course, and a lot of lives are being lost unnecessarily.
Ugochi Daniels, 1,000 people have died at sea, as our guest has just pointed out, but that's not changing anybody's minds. In fact, if we take the UK, for example, which isn't part of the European Union, but still part of the conversation, there is a hardline attitude when it comes to the boats, as they call them. This is happening in Italy as well. You're fighting an uphill battle when it comes to trying to change people's minds. What's the strategy for you guys?
I want to go back to the word you used before, which is sensible. Now, what we have seen is that people take irregular routes, people take risks when they do not have options. Regular pathways for labor mobility provide those options. And in fact, IOM continues to receive requests from many countries on how to expand regular pathways, how to give people options for how to migrate, to reduce irregular movements, to reduce the risk, to reduce smuggling, and reduce trafficking. But of course, they're also very focused on returns, and countries do need a way to return people who have gone through the process and are no longer able to or entitled to stay in the country. But it cannot be a single linear approach. It needs to be comprehensive, because you're not going to get to achieving the full benefits of migration. You're not going to get to win-win solutions solely focused on returns, when at the same time you need migrants for the economies to grow. And let's also recognize that for the countries of origin, with remittances, this is the key driver for development in the countries of origin. And it's also the key drivers for economic growth in the countries of destination. So it's a sensible conversation about how we have these win-win solutions that also ensure the best outcomes for the migrants themselves.
Ferdinando, would you agree that the current process of migrating into Europe is actually phenomenally complicated? It's very expensive, and it's actually often the people that need it the most are often just bamboozled by the amount of paperwork they need to do. But there's no way Europe streamlines that process, is there?
It's not easy. First of all, I'd like to note that there are two different legal regimes. One that, in principle, should apply to asylum seekers, people that have right to international protection. And this is an international regime which was established back at the beginning of the 50s. And that the countries of the European Union do respect. And totally different is the legal regime for economic migrants. I know it's not easy in many occasions to distinguish between people that have right to international protection and economic migrants. But I think that we have to keep this distinction in mind if we want to be effective in managing the phenomenon of migratory flows in a manner that is not distorting political agendas in our countries in Europe. And the second step that should be the twofold approach. On the one hand, countries of Europe should be able to better control their external borders, but at the same time, they should also be willing and capable of developing better managed flows of legal migration. As I said before, and also other people intervening in this conversation agree that our countries in Europe, we desperately need more people from outside Europe for the requirements of our labor market. The only problem is that to manage these flows in a manner that is consistent with our capability of integrating those persons that come from outside Europe into our societies.
Leila Badeau, we are looking at now a conversation that is taking place within the European Union. Things do have to change, so this is where the conversation is currently at. If you were in this meeting and they said to you, OK, we're going to put some more procedures into place, we're going to try and make it slightly easier, but we're going to limit migration significantly, legal migration, asylum seekers. Would that be good enough for you, or do you think that that's something that you can't compromise on?
I mean, no, of course, because it's an international legal obligation to grant protection to people in need of protection. And worldwide, you have more than 100 million people that live forcibly displaced due to war, conflict, crisis. So, I mean, we should not forget that this is an international obligation and that you cannot, put a cap on the number of people that can arrive to a country. And if we look at the figures, we see that actually they are manageable, the number of arrivals to Europe. So, I mean, it's a question of political will to put in place enough funding to welcome with dignified reception conditions people arriving instead of investing all this funding in building walls and fences. So it's a question of political choice. And one element, if I were in today's meeting with the minister that I would want to promote and see on the table is to have more relocation mechanism to allow a fairer distribution of people across the EU to avoid that everyone is stuck, for instance, in Italy with substandard and overcrowded shelters, and that people can be a bit dispersed across different countries to have more solidarity and responsibility between different states. I would also want to have more family reunification rules, simpler administrative procedure, because it creates a lot of burden on people to navigate a hugely complicated system, which is aimed at preventing people from accessing their rights and protection.
Agochi Daniels, we are looking at now an idea that there is an international obligation to asylum seekers in particular, but to legal migration purposes as well. But people are discussing a cap. Like, would that be something that you would accept if the immigration system got better?
For us, and I keep emphasizing win-win solutions. They are not going to achieve the migrant labor quantity that they need to drive and support their economic development. So in a way, a cap is probably more a political tool rather than a migratory tool. For the UN Organization on Migration, we are looking at how to support countries with a range of tools that enable them achieve, that they can use migration to achieve their development goals, their economic growth goals, their society needs. So that is what, certainly from my organization, what the advocacy and priority would be, and the technical support that we provide.
Fernando, it's often been said that all politics is local, but right now you've got 27 member states trying to come up with a political solution to this issue of migration. We've already talked about the fact that we're not going to get to a one-size-fits-all solution, but what's the bottom line for you? What's the solution that works for everybody, do you think?
Well, this is not an easy question to answer. Well, first of all, let me precision, if I may. Today, what is being discussed in the Council of Ministers of Interior are two specific measures that have to do with the regime for asylum seekers. And the attempt by the Commission is to find a compromise between those that would like to see more burden sharing, more distribution of asylum seekers, and those that are absolutely against any form of redistribution of asylum seekers. And the risk is that the two extreme, two extreme positions might, in a sense, converge in making it impossible to approve the measures, which are measures of compromise that have been proposed and are based on the idea of a cap. I know it's very complicated to define a cap. Figures that are attributed to each and every country, and the idea that those countries that do not want to receive asylum seekers should contribute financially by helping those that actually agree to accept asylum seekers. I don't know whether this is going to be a solution. In any case, even if there is an agreement on this compromise solution, it's only a very partial part of the problem. It only looks at the problem of how to deal with asylum seekers. It completely leaves out the other big issue of how to deal with economic migrants. And as I said, this is probably the most problematic part of the attempt to define a common EU migratory policies. The very reason, sorry.
So let me bring in Leila here. You've made some very interesting points there. Look, there has to be a framework for all of this. You can't have people coming in, particularly through illegal means, risking their lives to cross a border. But there needs to be a way of doing this. There isn't a motive. There isn't a problem. What regulatory framework would you think works that is both fair on people asylum seeking, people looking for legal migration, but that actually fulfills international obligations? Because what Fernando is saying is that there actually perhaps needs to be a compromise.
I mean, first, there are some rules in place. It's not like if we are in no man's land. So there are current asylum rules across the EU, but they are not being appropriately implemented, and often they disregard the rights of refugees. So this is one thing important to highlight. So even if there is no agreement today, still, I mean, there is a framework in place that we can better implement to the benefit of the rights of the people. Regarding a fairer framework, I think for us it's important to call for more resettlement. So basically, to allow people that are being stuck in refugee camps outside of the EU for many years to be able to come legally to Europe and to start a new life with a durable solution, with integration prospects, and not to being forced to embark on irregular and dangerous ways. So this is the need for more resettlement. It's also a question of global solidarity with countries outside of Europe that are already welcoming a lot of refugees, because we should not forget that more than 80% of the world's refugees are hosted actually in developing countries and not in Europe. Another way is to issue more humanitarian visa for people in need of protection so that they can take a plane, travel safely, and then receive asylum in Europe. So these are two things that Caritas Europe and his member is advocating for to avoid death at sea, for instance.
Fernando, a lot of this began in 2015 when Turkey allowed many Syrian migrants it was holding in its territory to enter into Europe. It then shut those borders as the political will in Ankara dictated. This isn't just about the European Union. This is about an international way of trying to deal with all of this. Are you confident that if we get an agreement in the EU, that can lead to an international agreement, a stronger one than we have right now?
I don't know whether the model of the agreement that was reached with Turkey back in 2015 would work with other countries. And I'd like to subscribe to the observation which was made a moment ago, that in fact many countries outside Europe are supporting a heavy burden in terms of refugees that are hosted in these countries. It's suffices to look at the situation of Syrian refugees. Most of them are relocated in Turkey, in Lebanon, in Jordan, in the neighboring countries. So when we look at Europe, we tend to have a rather Eurocentric view of the problem. The problem is a global, a world problem. This is absolutely correct. Now, in order to be able to develop an agreement, you can like it or not, but whether you would be able to develop an agreement like the one which was concluded with Turkey, with other countries, this is something which is not easy because you will need a strong, maybe also an authoritarian government like the one which existed in Turkey at the time to impose such a deal. You take refugees on your country and we give you the money which is needed to support the cost of this integration. There are many other countries, I'm looking in particular at other countries along the coast of the southern Mediterranean Sea that are not in a position to offer such a guarantee because they are not sufficiently strong, they're not sufficiently well established, the government, and they're not sufficiently sure to be able to
Sorry, Fernando, we're running out of time, and I want to bring Ogochi Daniels in here. Ogochi Daniels, after listening to everything that Fernando has said, do you still think there is, in your words, a win-win solution to all of this?
Absolutely. And he did make the point about it not being a European issue and that it's global. And I just want to remind everyone that we have two global agreements, the Global Compact on Refugees and the Global Compact on Migration, that actually provide comprehensive tools to member states that work for member states and that work for the migrants and refugees themselves. So the tools are there, the evidence is there. What we need is the political commitment.
I want to thank all our guests, Ogochi Daniels, Leila Bodeau and Fernando Nelly Ferrucci. And I want to thank you as well for watching. Now, you can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Imran Khan, and the whole team here, bye for now.